All right, cool. All right, good morning, everyone. It's 9:50. We'll go ahead and get started. My name is Jerron Vell. I am the Senior Associate Research and Data Analyst here at the Department of Higher Education and Workforce Development. I have the pleasure of presenting our presenters today, our moderator. I'll be the moderator, and I have the pleasure of presenting my colleagues at the Student African American Brotherhood. Before we get started, there's some virtual conference etiquette to remind everyone of. All the participants should be muted to eliminate any background noise. We want to see your faces. If you have a camera, please turn it on so you can engage with us. And all presentations will be live, so bear with us with any technical issues. I'll be managing the chat for questions throughout the presentation. If you enter the session and decide it's not for you, of course, you can move on to another session that's live like you would do at any other conference. And all sessions will be recorded, so you will have access to this conference after it's over. And please don't forget to engage with us on social media if you have the opportunity using the hashtag equity2021 at DHEWD. All right, and with that, I will turn it over to the presenters, Dr. Bledsoe and his team. 1 second, let me get that going, and we'll get started.
All right, I am sharing my screen.
1 second. Oh, you got it? Okay, great, cool.
Well, awesome. Good morning, everyone. You probably saw I just put a note in the chat inviting you to check out our website. We know we won't have a great deal of time this morning, but certainly we'd like to invite you to visit our website to learn more about the work we do nationally. We recently moved to Springfield about a year ago, and I'll tell you a little bit more about that in a second. I have joining me Alan Taylor, and you'll get to meet Alan here in a second. He is the current president of our Evangel University S.A.A.B chapter, and Alan will tell you a little bit about himself before he gets into a number of the slides that he will cover. We've been doing a number of conversations around shaping a culture for access, persistence, and completion for females of color. Many of you all, and I see some familiar faces that I know are familiar with our work. We just celebrated 31 years on October 17th. So we're the longest running male initiative in the country that does what we do, particularly for post-secondary success, and the work we've been in that space for specifically 31 years. Not quite as long for community colleges and high schools and middle schools, but certainly for four-year campuses. We serve middle school, high schools, and 2- and 4-year campuses around the country. Our fastest growing sector are community colleges, with the second being high schools. We moved, as I said before, to Springfield per the request of a number of stakeholders here locally in the Springfield area, the mayor and President Smart of Missouri State, and a number of other dignitaries, Chamber of Commerce, et cetera. After 3 years of discussing the value of having S.A.A.B located here in the city of Springfield and what that could mean for the city, and certainly what that could mean for the state of Missouri. I want to also offer that we're in the process of onboarding S.A.A.B chapters in the St. Louis area with 4 school districts. I won't name those districts just yet because we haven't executed an MOU just yet, but stay tuned for a lot of incredible synergy in the St. Louis area, and we hope to see that grow around the state. I do want to mention that we have a national conference coming up in April in St. Louis, April 8th through the 10th. It's on our website. Registration is open. We invite you to consider bringing students and yourselves to our conference. Our conference has always been open to anyone who would like to join us and be a part of that experience. And we're going to have a sold-out crowd in Chesterfield, Missouri at the DoubleTree by Hilton in Chesterfield. All right, let's have Alan tell you a little bit about himself and a little bit about some of the research we've been looking at that certainly aligns very well with the work we do and what the literature says we should do. Alan?
Awesome. So good morning, everyone. Like Dr. Bledsoe said, my name is Alan Taylor. I attend Evangel University, which is here in Springfield, Missouri. I've been blessed to be the chapter president over at my school's campus, and it's just been a blast. We've been on and going for about a year now, and just a lot of opportunity, a lot of fun has just been going on with my time with S.A.A.B. So that's a little bit about me. I'll get into these statistics and these bulleted points. So we'll talk about a force of inequality. The retiring us generation is better educated than the replacement generation. This is the first time for any developed nation. And that's from Jim Wolfson. To continue, education is the most important counterweight on the social justice scale. Another quote from him. And then this is what we know about students of color and low-income students. We know that they are more likely to live in underdeveloped areas within major cities or in sparsely populated rural areas. Also, they are more likely to have attended ineffective elementary and secondary schools, and they're less likely to have access to college prep coursework. And this is important because most of the S.A.A.B members do come from low-income students.
Absolutely. And what you're noticing also, if anybody knows my style, when I have the opportunity to present, I always involve students. And so Alan has been on several platforms with me. Probably the largest was back in February for ACT. We did a national presentation for about 1,400 on the platform. So he's had a lot of experience hanging out with me on these platforms. But when we think about policies and practices, and I just did a visit with an institution in Georgia about 2 weeks ago, because S.A.A.B is also serving as a technical assistant provider for a number of institutions who bring us in to help with their MEL initiative, whether it's S.A.A.B or not. And in many cases, when they bring us in, it's not a S.A.A.B chapter. So last week or 2 weeks ago, my visit to Georgia to one university in the University System of Georgia's a number of institutions that are involved in that system, brought us in to talk about the MEL initiative. And we looked at a number of their policies and practices that impact the initiative and certainly impact the students. You know, when we look at the use of alternative measures of student success and not place so much emphasis on standardized tests. Now we know standardized tests right now, tests have been waived in many cases. And I've had a number of conversations with the College Board as well as ACT. I used to work for the College Board back in the mid 80s when I finished my master's some years ago in the Atlanta area. So I know that area very well. But as we think about access and success of our students, I want to invite those on the platform to ensure that you have looked at your policies and practices, because in many cases, working with males of color in particular, there typically tends to be disconnect. I was brought into Minnesota many years ago, over 10 years ago, to one community college that was not able to keep their young men of color, specifically Black males, engaged. They would bring 100 in and only 10 would return year 2. So something was going on with disconnects all around that campus. And I didn't know that campus. The first day I was on that campus, I told the president, I don't know your campus, but I can tell you one thing for sure. You have a number of disconnects. Where are the disconnects? Let's look at that. Let's do a culture audit. Let's begin to SWOT, if you will, your policies and practices and see where the disconnects are. Now, I'm happy to report they ended up becoming one of our S.A.A.B chapters, our first ever in the state of Minnesota. Now we have several in Minnesota, particularly after George Floyd's unfortunate death. But we have that institution now still with us, and their data now is like night and day, just because we fixed what was broken and certainly connected the disconnect. We think about business leaders who think college graduates are prepared for the workforce. Only about 11%. Got this from NASPA, talking to my friends there. Business leaders, and we in S.A.A.B try to be very intentional, and Alan will tell you as one representative, he's already met with Commerce Bank's president 3 times for lunch here in the Springfield area. We're very intentional about connecting the education to career piece for our guys in S.A.A.B. But business leaders think college graduates are prepared for the workforce, only about 11%. Now, when we look on the other side, chief academic officers who believe that their institutions are very or somewhat effective at preparing students, 96%. That's a big difference in terms of what's going on internally and how institutions are oftentimes perceived externally. So conversations need to take place and getting those community stakeholders, as we're doing in a number of our communities, as we look at the ecosystem for our S.A.A.B students, you know, involving key stakeholders to engage our students on a regular basis. We're doing that here as a model city. Springfield is becoming that. because once a month we bring all of our S.A.A.B chapters together. We just did it this past Saturday. All the high schools, all the colleges. We have 9 chapters in this city, 5 high schools and 4 area colleges. Drury is currently on the way to onboard their chapter, Drury University. But that's a big difference when you think about how chief academic officers view what we're doing internally as institutions versus those external. The perpetual challenge is ensuring that everyone's a part of the conversation. So when I go into communities, I don't have a lot of conversations about why there's so much focus on males or Black males in particular. Our 2 largest populations we serve are Black males and Latino males. Of course, we have a very diverse group of young men as a part of S.A.A.B, Black, white, brown, Pacific Islander, Vietnamese, Alaskan Native, because we just started working in Alaska, Fairbanks area about 3 years ago. So we're very diverse now, which led us to do a brand refresh, to look at how we present ourselves and what our brand suggests and message about us. We want all of our students to feel included. We want them to feel validated in this space. This is a very student-driven initiative, and we want everybody to feel like their voice is important. So having stakeholders find their place in the conversation oftentimes is a challenge. When we're looking at DEI work, diversity, equity, inclusion work, where is the person's voice in the conversation? Faculty, staff, students, community leaders, where's their voice? I've been asking this question probably over 15 years. Has America lost a generation of males of color? And particularly as I think about Black males, because the data still suggests, and we know on this platform, Black males are at the bottom of the totem pole. I was so encouraged last week when I received a call from a community college in the state of Louisiana. We have no chapters in the state of Louisiana, and I am just tickled down that we're about to get our first one, community college in the state of Louisiana. If you look at Louisiana data, particularly for Black males, at the bottom when it comes to graduating Black males in that state. You can ask Lumina. I follow Lumina very well. We've been funded by Lumina over 10 plus years. We were Lumina's first male initiative they ever funded, early 2000s when we first connected with Lumina. But this is the first time that in our history, a generation will not exceed their parents educationally or economically. That's what's at stake when we think about who's at the table, why they're at the table, why there's so much emphasis, why there are summits like today. Because this is what's at stake, educationally, economically.
So now we'll transition into the history of S.A.A.B. First and foremost, it was founded on the campus of Georgia Southwestern State University 31 years ago. The impetus for S.A.A.B start was largely inspired by the low academic performance of Black males undergraduates at GSW, with a dismal overall aggregate GPA of a 1.75 on a 4.0 scale.
I'm happy to report I was just on that campus, the very first campus, about 2 weeks ago. I visited because, again, we just celebrated 31 years. So it gave me an opportunity to go back, connect with the young men who are still underway. 31 years later, we still have a chapter at Georgia Southwestern State University. This is President Jimmy Carter's alma mater. He lives 9 miles away in a little town called Plains, Georgia. This college is in Americus, Georgia, which is the founding grounds for Habitat for Humanity. We did a lot of work with Habitat, building houses, having our S.A.A.B guys out all around the country. Habitat was our top and certainly most important service project nationally. So we're happy to report that our young men at Georgia Southwestern are still underway. Our second oldest chapter is University of Texas at Austin.
Now we'll transition to the threefold cause of S.A.A.B. First and foremost is to ensure that young men of color throughout the nation have the education to career support they need to achieve lives of purpose and success. Secondly, is to enable young men of color to be recognized for their talent, drive, and contributions to society. Last but not least, we would like to build and sustain strong bonds amongst men of all backgrounds.
So you heard me talk about the education to career piece. That's huge for us. A lot of companies are seeking S.A.A.B out. They certainly develop a pipeline when we look at some of the medical fields, particularly hospital groups. have reached out to us. I can't begin to tell you how many banks and other companies reach out to us on a regular basis because they're very impressed with our success and the work that we've done with very limited resources, and we're working on that as well. When we go down to that third bullet, we recently added the third bullet in terms of our overall threefold cause because we're very school-based driven. All of our chapters are at a school, middle school, high school, 2 or 4 year college. But that third bullet begins to beg the question, what about young men who are not in school? So beginning to think about how can we work with boys clubs, Boy Scouts, YMCAs, community groups to engage those young men who are not in school. I would venture to say that a lot of the problems we hear when we think about cities like Chicago and the South Side in particular are young men who are not in school. Who's engaged in that group? And that's the conversation we're beginning to have in S.A.A.B as we go around the country meeting with our donors and those who have funded us in the past, Kellogg and Lumina, Kresge, Skillman, Knight Foundation. We've had conversation with them, Fossil, AT&T. You know, what might it look like for S.A.A.B to engage young men who are not in school? So stay tuned for more to come on that because we get a lot of call at our headquarters from parents and grandmothers and mentors trying to connect young men to our program. And we've been mostly having to say no because they're not at one of our schools. And we're tired of saying no. And so we're looking at a way we can engage young men who are not at one of our schools as a member of the chapter. So stay tuned for that.
So who are S.A.A.B members? More than 90% of the participants are African Americans, 6% being Latino or Hispanic. Half have no parent who had a college degree, 1/3 have a parent who did. Almost 70% attend 4-year colleges and 1/3 a 2-year institution. Almost all are enrolled full-time. The remainder attend high school or middle school.
The number of Latino males, this data is a little dated. We're about to do another evaluative study or have one done on S.A.A.B. We're working on that as we speak. But if we look at the data, how it shifts, our Latino population has increased probably closer to 10% now. And then we are obviously becoming more and more diverse as we allow the option of brother to brother, S.A.A.B to be called locally brother to brother, with school districts as well as some colleges and universities who choose to use that brand locally. Everyone is a part of S.A.A.B nationally, but we do offer as a part of our statement of affiliation that one can refer to their initiative as brother to brother. So we're seeing a lot of diversity come about just by way of that policy change.
The unique advantages of S.A.A.B. S.A.A.B is committed to attainment and degree completion of our young men. S.A.A.B builds a sense of belonging, support, accountability, and aspirations in our students. It has also proven a track record, internal and external evaluations. S.A.A.B has the capacity to collect data and measure student and chapter progress. Also has a national network of members, middle school to college, and alumni association, and it also embodies what most of the research nationally has shown as critical to boost success in college.
So you see, we're very research oriented and data driven. One thing I love that Lumina did for me many years ago, over 15 years ago, Lumina told me, I love what you're doing, Dr. Bledsoe, but we want you to have good data. So they invested in us. They put their money where their mouth was and invested in us, where we hired a firm, Equal Measure, formerly known as OMG Center for Collaborative Learning. Some of you all might know them as that, based in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. And they spent 3 years with us, visiting with S.A.A.B chapters, talking with our stakeholder groups, our donors, our advisors, and we formed this theory of change, and they collected data and did an evaluative study on us. So stay tuned for more to come as we look at phase 2 of our data, particularly as we track our middle school, high school, 2- and 4-year students all together. And now we have alumni association as well, because students want to stay connected beyond graduating from your respective institutions you might represent on this platform this morning. How do young men stay connected to something, a family, if you will? alternative family, that alternate family, I should say, that oftentimes gangs become. Just had a conversation with a principal in this state. And I said, what's the biggest challenge in your building? She said, gangs. I said, well, if we start S.A.A.B, some of your gang members will want to join S.A.A.B. So we got to negotiate that transaction, what that looks like, because of the dynamics in your building. Those are real conversations we have, because those are real life issues our students face. So we're very data driven and certainly research oriented.
So S.A.A.B is pretty unique. S.A.A.B turns a key barrier to minority male achievement, a lack of strong support system, into a major strength. S.A.A.B is one of the very few national initiatives focused on post-secondary success of young men of color. While primarily serving African Americans and Latinos, it is open to all. This is very important. It includes the participation of young men of all racial backgrounds. S.A.A.B complements other important efforts such as the Campaign for Black Male Achievement and My Brother's Keeper that primarily focus at the elementary, middle school, and high school levels.
And I want to lift up what's in red. We're one of the very few national, I don't know another national initiative that focuses on post-secondary success of young men of color. National initiative that's been around 31 years. We're that. And we're open to all. One of the things that came out of our brand refresh, we quit spelling out the acronym S.A.A.B. The brand equity for us is in the acronym. And we don't have to say Student African American Brotherhood. Now, to the IRS, we still Student African American Brotherhood. You all get that. That's what we filed to get our 501c. But we're S.A.A.B now nationally because we want all of our students to embrace a brand that they feel connected to, regardless of racial background.
Talk about the highly effectiveness of S.A.A.B. S.A.A.B members are achievers. 53% reported getting all A's and B's. 32% said they got mostly B's and C's. 95% remained enrolled throughout the year. Also, S.A.A.B members have high aspirations. 98% have said that they're on pace to achieving a 4-year degree or higher. 40% plan to get a master's degree, and 41% would pursue a doctorate. Then S.A.A.B students also show deep levels of campus involvement, high academic and career aspirations, as well as close peer relationships.
So we're very proud of our students. They continue to progress and manifest their destiny academically and getting their high quality credentials. I'm happy to say I was contacted a few weeks ago by Good Morning America. And they wanted to do a story, they were doing a story on initiatives and schools that may have lost young men due to COVID, dropped out, whatever reason were impacted or something shift. And so we got a call from Good Morning America, and I couldn't help them because that's not what we do. Now I said, if you all want to celebrate some students and we talk about some success story, we could be here all day. Of course, that show didn't happen. You get it later. You get it later. Let's move on.
S.A.A.B is locally focused, national in scope. There's more than 352 collegiate, high school, and middle school S.A.A.B chapters in 41 states.
And growing. And so as we think about the first generation students, and we serve a good number of first generation, and I know that's something that's probably of interest to many of you all on this platform. We've been very intentional about identifying and connecting with our first generation students. Thank God for our data system to help us with that. Engaging them early in middle school and high school. I cannot begin to tell you how excited I remain working with middle schools and high school, especially middle school. And we started working with middle schools over 12 years ago. That's a stage and an age and phase that certainly many of us on this platform are familiar with or should be familiar with, as we're losing students not even making it to high school. And so to begin to have a conversation about graduating from high school, we really have to look at our students in that middle school sector. And I'm so excited that we're about to start a number of middle schools with high schools and respective districts in the St. Louis area. Again, stay tuned for more to be announced about that as we execute those agreements with those districts. And addressing issues germane to our students, all students, not just first generation, has always remained a very important thing to do and a dynamic within any S.A.A.B initiative. We asked that question many years ago, why students came to S.A.A.B meetings as we did focus groups and collected qualitative data and issues germane to them was certainly one that rose to the top, ensuring that our students have a plan. We have a personal development plan because research shows us and tells us that males of color, specifically Black and Latino males, don't have a written plan. Most of their planning takes place in their head. And we want to make sure that our students have at least a 3 to 5 year plan, and that PDP, personal development plan, allows for that to take place, and that's to check in with students so they can be very intentional. 4 core values play out in S.A.A.B. First being proactive leadership, self-discipline, intellectual development, accountability. And so we ensure through our PDP that those core values are embraced as our students do planning for their future. And then assigning them mentors. S.A.A.B mentoring plays out in a 3-prong effect approach, if you will, student to student, student to younger student, and certainly the student to professional or faculty, in many cases staff, but the professional, it could be a community person, but that student to professional or adult, if you will, because sometimes people may not deem themselves professionals, is a third transaction that plays out. And certainly engaging and empowering our students as proactive leaders, as I said, is one of those core values. We talk about what does it take to create this experience we call S.A.A.B. I want to invite you to think about this particular model that I created some years ago, many years ago, when we think about the student experience. So take S.A.A.B out and just put student experience. Many institutions want to create a student experience. A lot of institutions are invested in DEI work. What does that look like when we talk about an experience? So you have to create a culture that begins to shape people's values. They form beliefs about that culture. That's when you can see behaviors transform. Many of us try to transform behavior when we haven't created a culture for change. And so I want to invite that's what we use in S.A.A.B. And we use our young men. They're a part of the process. Middle school students sitting around the table with their principal, with their teachers and faculty, shaping a strategic plan. Alan will tell you they just finished their strategic plan at Evangel University. They did the plan. And so I subscribe to Paul Rogers' theory. I'm a counseling psychologist by training. Rogerian model, Carl Rogers said, if you want to help the client, you got to involve the client. If we want to help students, you got to involve students, and particularly these young men. Get them involved. We find that these young men, when you look at if you trace them from high school, they were very involved in high school, very involved in high school. Talk to your students on the college level. What did you do in high school? They're in everything in high school. Then they get to our college campuses and do nothing. Very little involvement. So what happened with that shift? And I've been challenging my colleagues in higher education, particularly student affairs, to really, really dig deep in what shift for the student who was very involved in high school, but comes to our campus and is not involved. And many institutions want to say, well, we got apathetic students. No, you don't. Something else is going on in that culture. So create a culture that shapes their values. They form beliefs about that culture. You can see behavior change. Be it DEI work, whatever kind of work, you can see behavior transform. I want to invite that. And I think I talk about my 3 C's. I just talked about this last week in another lecture I did. 3 C's of effective engagement. You got to connect, particularly with young men. Generation Z, not going to ask you a question. They're not going to ask for help. It's getting even worse than it was. So we remember in locus parentis, for those who are old schoolers like myself, I've been in this business 36 years. In locus parentis, we know what that means, hand-holding and showing and navigating, helping them navigate that experience we call college, right? But how do you connect with your students? And once you connect, what's the communication? How do you communicate with them on a regular, consistent basis? And the consistency piece is the third piece of that. Young men in particular want consistency. They've been disappointed enough coming out of dysfunctional, oftentimes communities, families, etc. Sometimes dysfunctional K-12 experiences. And we get them in college and they haven't had a sense of consistency at any point in their lives. And so I want to ensure, and we ensure in S.A.A.B, that we're consistent with our young men. That's why that alumni association exists, so that we're consistent to connect them on a regular basis, keep them connected to what we call a family. And we say we don't create a program, Alan, we create a what?
A family.
A family. Guys, stay connected to family. You don't have to worry about retention when I look forward to coming back to school, because I want to see the family, want to see my brotherhood, etc. When we look at fraternities and sororities in that research, and I'm a Greek, I'm a member of Phi Beta Sigma, 41 years. When we look at that research, it's the connection to family, what appears to be family, the home away from home family, right? So that's very important as we think about this work. So supporting our young men during COVID, I talked a lot about this on the ACT platform back in February. They asked me to visit around this, challenging things that are happening for our young students, particularly guys in our chapter. And certainly our chapters have been impacted all around the country, particularly having to meet during COVID, and even now, some of them are still meeting virtually. That's a real shift in how they engage and how they're used to engage in one another. So we have certainly challenged our institutional partners, all 351 plus of them, to value and engage and celebrate the rich diversity our young men bring to the experience, higher education and otherwise. In this case, we were talking about higher education, and we want to continue to cultivate a climate where they feel validated, respected, their voices heard, and you engage them to feel like they're part of your community. And that's what I've been telling the city of Springfield. They said, well, Dr. Bledsoe, how can we keep students here? How can we keep our talent, get them connected and they feel validated? You're not going to lose people that feel connected to a community. You ever say connected to something? You're not leaving that if it's a valued connection. And certainly creating a campus, a climate that ensures that everyone feels embraced and that there's a sense of fairness, equality, equity, if you will. We spend a lot of time talking about equity. And I do a lot of work around that and been doing that for decades. So I invite you to, if you're not thinking about how your students have, how to engage them. I'm reading a lot in the Chronicle about engaging students differently. We're having to change the narrative, and it's a new normal. The new normal is yet new again because of COVID. And so we hope you're doing some things that are different to really think about the best way to further engage students in this climate and during this pandemic. Here's our contact information as we begin to wind up. Alan knows that S.A.A.B time is what?
On time.
On time. And we're going to finish on time. And we teach our guys the respect time. Here's our contact information, how you can follow us via our website, Facebook, Twitter, Instagram as well. I don't have the Instagram handle up, but you can find us on Instagram as well. We invite, if you're interested in our program, to have a conversation, to set up an initial virtual just to kind of learn more about what we do. Please reach out to us at saabnational@aol.com. Yes, I'm still using AOL. I had a student the other day ask me, what is AOL, Dr. Bledsoe? And I just laughed. But do contact us if you're interested. And there's a way on our website for you to submit an inquiry for us to set up a call as well. I'm going to yield back to Jerron. Thank you all so much for being on the platform this morning. Thank you, Alan, for joining me. He's really here. We're at the headquarters, and Alan's in our conference room, so he's just next door. But I thank Alan for joining us as well. Thank you all so much. Good morning.
All right. Thank you so much, Dr. Wild. I like that. Change the culture, change the behavior. That's deep, Doctor. I appreciate that. Yes, thank you so much. We got the contact information. Also, we have the contact information. I do see a question from Ms. Kristen Flynn Peters. So I'll forward that, Ms. Peters, I'll forward that to Dr. Bledsoe because we have to wrap up here. We have about 6 minutes to wrap up to get to your next session. But Doctor, I will forward that question to you. That was put in the chat. And you can connect with Dr. Peters. I think you also put the website in the chat as well. Again, this will be recorded, so we'll have this afterwards, after this over. And thank you so much to Dr. Bledsoe. Thank you so much, Alan, for presenting. Mr. Allen, really appreciate it. And I will hand this off to the next session. Thank you both, and thank you for joining us. See you later.
Thank you very much. Enjoyed it.
Take care. Awesome. Thank you.